Good morning. It is a rainy Monday in London, and it's kind of cold. Uh, it's very quiet. I have a day off work, and I thought it's been a long time since I actually recorded a video. It's been a few months, so I thought maybe I would record something, quick little update of what's been going on. So I spent all summer working on my dissertation. It was a lot of hard work and a lot of writing and rewriting and discovering, sudden errors and making corrections and going back and doing things over again a lot. It was my first time doing a systematic review, so there were elements of um, that I was still learning, and through this learning process, I learned a lot. My dissertation was looking at plant-sourced omega-3 supplementation and its effects on inflammation. And uh, through the process of doing like really deep diving into the research, into the literature, I kind of discovered that a lot of the metrics we were using for um, for measuring systemic inflammation maybe aren't the best metrics for indicating to what degree omega-3 supplementation is actually reducing inflammation because of the way that it works with our lipidome. So on a very like micro scale, it may be making large impacts to our um, inflammatory processes, but because of the way that often these things are measured, um, certain blood tests, it's not really capturing what the actual true effect is. So it was sort of a project that opened up more questions rather than supplying answers, which I guess is what a lot of research ends up doing. You go into something thinking, well, I have this question and I just want to get a straightforward answer. And then in the process of finding the answer, you discover that there's so many more questions. We see this in all sorts of areas of life, not just research. uh, so that was how that went down. I found a lot of really interesting papers. Uh, there there really wasn't enough consistency between the different studies to really make direct comparisons and to really pool the data in a way that would have made for um, a useful meta-analysis. So every single study used very different participant groups with very different conditions, different lengths of time, and different dosages. Though it did seem like there were certain sort of windows of dosage that seemed to have more of an effect than others. But again, science is the idea is that you want to have as much data as possible to be able to sort of like coalesce that into a cohesive idea of what's going on, because you might get a single result in one study and then a different result in another study that may be very conflicting. But if you then have like 50 studies of basically the same thing, then you start to get a pattern. You start to see, well, overall it tends to be this or that, or you might discover that maybe there's extra variables you hadn't accounted for. So really, at this point, there's just not enough data to make hard conclusions. But it was really interesting to go over that data and to really read it and invest in it and um, see what is going on in that area. Omega-3 fatty acids are what's in fish, but there's also omega-3 fatty acids in nuts and seeds, like flax seeds are particularly high in it. Chia seeds are a really great source of omega-3 fatty acids. However, there's a few different types of omega-3 fatty acids. So you can have the short chain ones and the long chain ones. And I was specifically looking at long chain omega-3 fatty acids. So this you would get typically from fish oils. And so for decades, since really the 50s, there's been this big interest in fish oils as a nutritional supplement and the benefits from that. There's anti-inflammatory properties, there's um, cognitive benefits as well. There's a lot that have been um, that people believe to be true about omega-3 fatty acids, and there's a lot of literature, and I've specifically focused on inflammation-based properties. So the other elements of it, I'm not an expert in. But looking at omega 3s, so say you get your omega 3s from plant sources from your food, and you're getting them from nuts and seeds specifically. So you've got your chia seeds, you've got your flax seeds, and you're like, is this enough? Do I need to be taking supplements? Um, so our bodies do actually transform the short chain omega 3 fatty acids into long chain omega 3 fatty acids. So like so you might have heard of ALA, DHA, and EPA. So ALA is what you would find in nuts and seeds. EPA and DHA is what you would typically find in fish oils. And there was this idea that because we have a very slow process of changing our ALAs into EPAs and DHAs, it's a very slow process. It's not very efficient. However, we still do that, and I think if you're getting sufficient amounts of that consistently throughout your life, that's probably fine. And there's also some argument as to whether or not this gets upregulated in people who are not consuming DHA and EPA directly. But then there's this whole other element of, why are we taking it from fish? Because fish get EPA and DHA because they eat algae. And it's the algae that has the preformed DHA and EPA, and algae is a plant. And so you can actually get algal sources of EPA and DHA. And that is becoming more and more widely available. It's a vegan source. These tend to be grown in more controlled environments, so that there's more the exposure to like heavy metal poisoning, things like that, is much lower. So in a lot of ways, it's like a cleaner um, uh, supplement. So there's a lot of benefits to, if you're going to take EPA and DHA, to looking to algal sources. There are other ways to get EPA and DHA that are plant-based. So there's also been some development in creating a yeast that has a high yield of EPA and DHA. So I think there's a few other ones as well. So there's multiple ways of getting vegan sourced long chain omega-3 fatty acids, and there is a decent amount of literature that suggests that there's anti-inflammatory benefits. How those come about in terms of how much of a dose you need to be taking over what period of time, and how much of an effect that has on inflammation in particular conditions. It's a complicated topic, but this is what I've spent what I spent all summer looking at and reading about. So if you want to learn a lot about omega-3 fatty acids, specifically plant-sourced omega-3 fatty acids, that's what I've spent a lot of time doing. And I find this really interesting because I have over the last few years, I've really focused on eating more plant-based, and to this point, now I occasionally will have like some cheese here and there, but that's pretty much it. Otherwise, I'm pretty much all plant-based. Uh, Sometimes I'll gift myself some honey, you know, Like, you have to allow yourself small pleasures every now and again. But overall, I really have focused on dramatically reducing my intake of animal products because it just, the way that things are done in today's world, I really don't agree with on an ethical level. And from a nutritional standpoint, there are a lot of benefits to greatly reducing your impact or your intake of particularly red meats and processed meats, but other meats as well. And it's a bit, the science on this is still emerging. There's a lot of variables to account for, and there's also elements of who's funding research, and so it's a complicated subject. So it's difficult to have like a really solid, clear cut answer, which is what everyone wants, right? But ultimately, what you have to do is look at what are your own values and what do you feel you need to do and what is a worthy sacrifice. Because I think no matter what you choose, on some level, you're probably going to be making some sort of a sacrifice on one dimension or multiple dimensions when you're making choices about our food, because our food system, there's there's a lot of exploitation in our food system. There's a lot of chemicals in our food system. There's a lot of harmful farming practices. There's a lot of really messed up things with the food that we have access to. So you have to make the choices that are best for you, and that is a complicated thing to do. Anyways, so omega-3 fatty acids, plant-based nutrition, that's what I've really focused on. And now I've handed in my dissertation. I officially am done my master's degree. All of the results are being finalized, and at the end of November, I will be eligible to um, seek accreditation as a nutritionist in the UK, but also abroad, depending on the different organizations and the different countries that I might be interested in working in. And at this point, I'm very much undecided as to what the future holds for my career, but I'm really fascinated by the our nutrition, by plant-based nutrition, by how our nutrition impacts our psychology and vice versa. I mean, my undergrad was in psychology, and so having that understanding and seeing those connections, when we're relaxed and happy, we digest our food better. We get more nutrients from our food when we're in a positive emotional state. And vice versa, when we're not feeding our bodies with the nutrition it needs, that can cause depression, that can cause anxiety, that can cause all sorts of mental disturbances. So these are really, it's a bidirectional relationship, and a complicated one and an interesting one. So at this point, I'm just really excited about the science that exists and the science that needs to come into being, the things that need to be investigated for us to really have a more holistic understanding of what the body needs and what our spirits need and how these things, you know, go together. um, so at the moment, I've now that I've finished my degree, it was very difficult, very challenging, and in like mentally. And there's a bit of time. There's a few months before I can really go into that as a nutritionist. And so I've taken some time to divert my attention to working as a vegan chef in Shoreditch in London, which has been really fun getting back into like I have worked in hospitality in the past. A lot of my 20s was spent as a barista, and I was also a chef in a soup kitchen. Um, well, a soup-based restaurant. Soup kitchen has a specific meaning that I don't actually intend. But it was a restaurant in Montreal that primarily made soups. And so I have done some kitchen work, but this is more specifically kitchen work. I'm not really interacting with customers. I'm just making food, and it's all vegan, which has really been a very cool experience. In the past, when I've worked in hospitality, there's always been, some cheese, some, meats here and there. And in the past, I hadn't really gone into understanding the sort of ethical dilemmas in our foods, and it didn't really bother me at the time. But now that I've done that, I've gone into a lot of those areas, and done some research. I now know that I would have a very difficult time in a restaurant serving, like, making um, food that involves animal products, depending on the sourcing. But I think where I'm at in my life right now, I was very happy to be hired at a vegan restaurant. So I've been doing that, and it's been really fun. Shoreditch is sort of east of central London, and my restaurant that I'm working at is just at the bottom of Brick Lane. So when I'm off work, I can wander around Brick Lane, and it's a really lively and varied neighborhood. There's a lot of textiles around. As I was going to work yesterday, there was a whole lot of just racks and racks of clothing in the streets. There's a big market going on, which I suspect might be a regular occurrence on the weekends, but I haven't been going there long enough to know whether or not to know how regular it is. And then Brick Lane is full of lots of restaurants, and there's a lot of vegan restaurants as well. I learned that that part of London is actually known as the Vegan Mile. So, so I work in the Vegan Mile, in London, which sounds very glorious, in a lot of ways. It is. So I've been having a lot of fun. It's been really challenging because working in a kitchen is very fast paced and very demanding. It's difficult to get breaks. Like it's not the same as working in an office where you have a set amount of work and you're able to, um, take breaks when you need them. It's a little bit more give and take of what is demanding in the moment, uh, and being really responsive to that. So yeah, it's been a lot, but I've been getting to know my coworkers. I think they're a lot of fun. There's uh, really great taste in music. I love when my coworkers put on music that really like suits the sort of atmosphere of a fast-paced kitchen. I love doing like the very sort of routine, like so Taco Tuesdays, we make an insane amount of tacos. We have 5 different kinds of tacos. And so what ends up happening is people are ordering constantly, and we have like an assembly line. And so you just get in this mode of you're just doing like, like 50 of like one thing, just one right after another, go, go, go. And there's something that I just really find, I guess, comforting in the routine, um, familiarity of that. I guess because a lot of my work has been doing that kind of repetition and manufacturing something of good quality, very quickly. So working in cafes, working, in a textiles factory, a lot of it is just short, repetitive actions that are really demanding on a certain level, but it's kind of fun because it's like a dance, like you're moving around, you know where things are, you just, you get into a rhythm. And I like that about it. I don't I don't really know what the future holds for me. I know that my my visa expires in a few months, and then my graduation ceremony is a few months after that. So I'm trying to figure out what to do in the interim. I don't think I'm quite in the place to commit to staying in the UK, but I am in this part of the world and I would like to do some exploring. So I think what might happen is I might travel to Ireland. I haven't been to Ireland yet, and I have some ancestry in Ireland that I just really like the idea of visiting the land that my ancestors are from and sort of seeing how my body responds. Because I found that coming to coming to the UK for the first time, coming to England, there were certain places that we went to that I felt like a very strong embodied reaction that I hadn't really felt before. And similarly, even though my I mean my I don't really know, there's a lot of question marks in my ancestry. um, and I know that uh, there's like Latin heritage on my dad's side, but I don't know from what exactly. And I know that when I went to Costa Rica, that was the most southern I've been in the Americas, and there was something about being in that sort of equatorial region that just spoke to me on a really deep level. And these things might not be connected to ancestry, um, but I do think that there's probably some element to that of your genetic memory. Um, that if you're not aware, there is actually some research that suggests that we retain genetic memories of our ancestors. So when your ancestors experience things, you can sort of have a felt sense of those things, even though you were not there, you were not a part of that, but it's in your DNA on a very deep level, certain things, anyways. And when I went to Costa Rica, even though I don't think Costa Rica is sort of like the land that my ancestors are from specifically necessarily, but there was some sort of deep connection that I felt there. And that was also a really amazing experience from that perspective. So for for the reason of how I experienced going um, to Costa Rica and how I experienced when I first traveled to the UK, I'm really excited about the idea of going to Ireland and seeing how my body responds to that. And yeah, so that's that's my hope right now. I'm not sure how to make that happen. I have a few ideas, but yeah, we'll see where it goes. I'm just gonna try different things and see what sticks. Anyways, so yes, I finished my dissertation. I finished my degree. I am working in Shoreditch and having a lovely time exploring more of London. And I don't know when I will see anyone again, but I'm sure it won't be too much longer. I'm still having a wonderful adventure, and it's been very intense, but very interesting, and I've grown a lot through all my experiences. So yeah, this has been my little update. There was a lot that happened over the summer that I could probably go into, but maybe not this time. Anyways, I hope that you are having a wonderful uh, first few days of fall and look forward to what this season brings. Goodbye. Love you all.